The French warned the U.S. government about China's secretive behavior at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
It was the French intelligence officials who went to the U.S. government, and they were working on building this lab.
The French government signed an agreement to help the Chinese build its first biosafety level 4 lab in Wuhan. The French were responsible for managing the lab's safety protocols until they were abruptly kicked out of the lab.
And this was the warning they gave to the State Department, that they had grave concerns as to Chinese motivations. And then, of course, in 2021, we saw in the State Department report that the Wuhan lab was engaged in classified research on behalf of the Chinese military, starting in when? The same time the French were completely kicked out of their collaboration in 2017.
2 years before that, according to David Asher, the State Department's former lead investigator, French intelligence allegedly warned the U.S. government that it had concerns about Chinese actions.
It was very clear to us when the virus had escaped into the world that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was at the base of it all. And while we couldn't prove it because, as you described, doctors being disappeared, journalists being taken off the map, we knew the history of the French-built lab, we knew the history that they'd been kicked out, we knew that there had been resources placed there in an attempt to try and make the lab more secure.
At least 8 Chinese doctors and scientists who were whistleblowers who just disappeared, right? China was digging mass graves, was preventing travel out of Wuhan while lying to the WHO and telling them, no, we have no new cases, right? That was going on in January of 2020.
We know that the Chinese implemented a domestic travel ban without implementing an international travel ban. So all of that together, Jordan, it's ironclad, conclusive proof that China is responsible for this outbreak and needs to be held accountable.
Prosecutors have moved to dismiss their case against a UC Davis researcher from China who had been accused of lying on her visa application.
The Department of Justice just last Friday dropped individual cases against 5 Chinese researchers in the United States accused of hiding their current ties to the Chinese military.
An attorney for Dr. Jen Tang tells KCRA3 tonight that the court is expected to sign this order to dismiss the case tomorrow. The Justice Department claimed that the doctor lied about her status as a member of China's military, but she claimed on the application that she had not served in the military.
This is a serious issue. It's been a serious issue. They've invaded offices in Congress. They are invading the universities. When I say invading, they are targeting these universities. And I'm talking about these are people that then become basically implanted spies.
You can't come to any sort of satisfactory arrangement with China as long as you don't recognize the fundamental nature of the hostility of this regime in China.
I'm fearful that we're getting to the point where prosecutions are political. And what I mean by that is they pursue certain cases and drop other cases.
We need to be brutally honest with ourselves. The Chinese Communist Party is at war with the United States, our way of life, the international system that we helped create through our blood, sweat, and tears.
We're talking about nationals of China who've ensconced themselves and infiltrated institutions of higher learning and institutions of great influence in the United States, and we are profiling them.
For the purpose of espionage. And the Chinese government is not really denying that. They sent 1,000 students home as the crackdown began.
The state of Mississippi has asked the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade.
This is the first case in my lifetime where there has been a direct, real challenge to the underpinnings of Roe versus Wade.
The court agreed to weigh in on a Mississippi law that would ban the procedure after the 15-week mark, before viability.
Their attorney general specifically asked for Roe and the KC cases to be overturned, for those precedents to be overturned.
Lower court struck the law down, saying it ran counter to a string of the Supreme Court's abortion rights rulings.
There is no right to abortion found in the Constitution, and Roe v. Wade has been attacked by legal scholars on the left and the right, so not just conservative legal scholars, but even liberal legal scholars, as a bad decision. So this is a great opportunity for the court to get it right.
If the court rules this Mississippi law can be upheld, it would upend our abortion law cases as we know them.
Stare decisis does not protect the right to murder. And that's exactly what this ultimately comes out to be, Jay.
The Supreme Court needs to decide whether a state has the ability to regulate abortions after the viability line. That's something that previous court decisions have been confusing about, so this will be a case that significantly clarifies abortion jurisprudence in this country.
Stare decisis is not in stone. As we say in our brief, the Constitution does not confer on the court's decisions priority or seniority or on higher status than the Constitution itself.
So Mississippi, they're defending their 15-week abortion ban, but directly put at issue Roe versus Wade and the Casey versus Planned Parenthood case. It's now heading to the U.S. Supreme Court. A county in Northern Virginia blocking our client, a live church, from worshiping and functioning, being able to utilize the land that they purchased, because the church, get this, cannot get an ABC license.
The letter says if you get a liquor license, an ABC permit, that's what they do in Virginia. If you get a liquor license, then in fact you can utilize the facility, but if you don't get a liquor license, you can't.
Even if a church was part of a denomination that there is not a strong anti-alcohol stance, for example, some Roman Catholic churches or Episcopal churches, even if that were the case, the state cannot force a church to pay for a permit for alcohol, which is another form of a tax, in order to function as a church.
We're going to federal court because this is what the county is saying. If the client would get the ABC license, the county would let the church operate like ready for this? Not like a church, but like a brewery or winery.
What is missing in this particular case is respect for the First Amendment.
Yes.
What is missing is respect for the free exercise clause.
The power to tax here is the power to control. And the power to control the church and its message. That's what you have to be concerned with.
They, again, want to take the tax exemption from this church and tax the church. So it's a creative way they thought in Prince George's County to go after a church and still get revenue.
This is not about alcohol. It's not about our liquor license. It's about freedom of religion and the special status that churches have under the law.
They do so much for the community at no cost to the community, just like the work that we do at the ACLJ. We're a nonprofit, tax-exempt organization because we can represent the tax-exempt church in their legal battle at no cost to the church.
Ben & Jerry's doesn't want its ice cream to be sold in some parts of Israel.
They're not going to sell any more ice cream in the West Bank. So this is part of the BDS movement.
Ben & Jerry's issued a statement saying it was inconsistent with its values for its ice cream to be sold in what it called occupied Palestinian territory.
The bigger company here is Unilever. This is a company, this is based in the UK and Dutch, but it's traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
They're going to decide what territory is Israel's sovereign territory and which is not. They're going to decide what's occupied territory, as if they have the right to do this.
Who are they to make that decision? Under what authority do they have?
If they're putting forward policies that violate the country they're doing business in, the law of that country,
correct, which is
then the independent board should not be able to override Unilever.
They're also talking about East Jerusalem. And their history is incorrect because in 1967, when the Arab countries attacked Israel, remember, it was the Arab countries that were defeated and the Israelis reclaimed, which was originally their land anyways, East Jerusalem, which is where you have the Western Wall and you have the Old City.
Israel is the sovereign in the West Bank. That is now Israeli territory as far as the world is concerned and ought to be concerned.
I wonder if they will keep selling in Hong Kong now that the Chinese communists have crushed its freedoms. Or Russia, Myanmar, or any other country blatantly flouting human rights.
They are gifted with something else called hypocrisy, because they're quite willing to do business, for instance, with China, but then yet they want to boycott Israel's sovereignty with respect to so-called occupied territories.
Judea and Samaria were rightful parts of the state of Israel, that Israel is not an occupying nation. This is not apartheid. This is the lone democracy in the Middle East.
You can't hide behind violating the law. This is not just a statement. No. This is an action.